Linda Hyder, one of the Can girls. Sarah Vaden and I are working together to talk to you about preserving food. You know, the past few videos, I've been a hot can girl. We've been talking about preserving your vegetables with heat and processing. Well, today I'm going to be talking about freezing. We're going to be talking about preserving our food at 0 degrees temperature. So it's going to be a cold time, but I hope a time that will be beneficial to you. So let's get going. Since it is June, I'm going to take off this coat. We're going to talk a little bit about freezing vegetables. In the demonstration today, I'm going to be freezing green beans. There's a couple of things I want you to consider before freezing. First of all, what is your preference? Do you like green beans that are canned, or do you like green beans that are frozen? Think about the purpose of what you're freezing. If you're going to just freeze zucchini to make zucchini bread, why don't you just go ahead and make the bread and then freeze the bread? So think about your purpose. Also think about your freezer space. Do you have enough space to put all those freezer containers? And also, when we're talking about freezer, we need to make sure that our freezer is at 0 degrees temperature. So you may want to go ahead and buy a freezer thermometer and put it in your freezer to make sure it's at 0, because that does affect the quality of your frozen foods. But overall, freezing is the safest, the quickest, the easiest, the most economical way to preserve your fruits and vegetables. Basically, in the freezing process, we're preparing the vegetable, we're washing it, we're blanching it, we're cooling it, we're draining it, and then we're putting it in the package. So it's a fairly easy process, but it is still research-based. So let's begin, and for just demonstration purposes, I'm going to pretend like this bowl is right underneath the sink. But when we're washing or preparing your vegetables, go ahead and cut them or whatever it takes to prepare them. And you want to wash them by just immersing them in some cold water. You don't want to just let them soak there for a long amount of time, because that could cause your nutrients to kind of be taken away. So you just want to go through the process of lifting them out of the water and maybe putting them into another container. And rinse, take that water out and do it again. Do it a couple times, lifting the vegetables, kind of swirling around with your hand, lifting them out of the water into a drain or colander. Once you have done that process, we're actually going to go to the blanching process. And blanching is just basically submerging your vegetables into a pot of vigorously boiling water. Now for the blanching, you're actually going to take your clean, prepared vegetable and submerge that into vigorously boiling water. And then put the lid on, and you want that water to come up to a vigorous boil again, and that's when you start your timing process. Research-based recipe will let you know how long that blanching time should be. Well, why do we blanch? Blanching is basically done to inactivate the enzymes. Those are the enzymes that affect your taste, your color, and your texture of the vegetable. It also helps stop any type of microorganism. So blanching is important for the quality of the vegetable. Different vegetables have different blanching times. My green beans are 3 minutes. You'll see corn on the cob would take 9 minutes. So there again, research has been done to determine how much time is needed for blanching. Now we're blanching in boiling water. Sometimes you may see blanching by steam, which takes longer than boiling water. And that may be used for some denser type vegetables, perhaps like maybe pumpkin or sweet potatoes, but really you can use either one for those. You may see microwave blanching. That is not recommended. It does not do a really good job of inactivating those enzymes, because it's not a very even type heat, so it's not very safe to use. So you want to do your blanching primarily in the boiling water process. If you don't have a nice pot and colander like this, perhaps you have a large stock pot. This is the hot water bath pot. You can boil water in here and submerge your vegetables in that hot water for the same amount of time, and use a colander or slotted spoon to quickly get those vegetables out, because you want to work quickly. As far as the blanching time, as I mentioned, I said we're going to wait for it to get up to boiling again and then start the timer for 3 minutes. If it takes longer than a minute for that water to start boiling again, then you've probably put too many vegetables in there. So you kind of want to watch the amount of vegetables that go in. If I over blanch this, if I put it in boiling water for more than 3 minutes, then I have the chance of kind of cooking it. And that's going to cause more loss of nutrients. And it could also kind of affect the flavor and texture also. If I underblanch it and go below the 3 minutes boiling, research says that that kind of stimulates those enzymes to keep working. So I'm really not stopping the enzymes. And there again, that could affect the finished product with freezing. So when the recipe calls for blanching, it's just a matter of putting that product into boiling water. Now some vegetables you do not have to blanch. For example, you may have to cook them first, like a potato or sweet potato or winter squash. The recipes may say to cook them and then freeze them, which that would be safe too. After your blanching time is up, 3 minutes in my example with the green beans, go ahead and turn off that burner, and we're going to quickly cool these beans. We're going to drain them. However you choose to boil those, you want to drain them. And then quickly submerge them into some ice water, because we want to stop those enzymes from actually cooking. We want to do a quick chill. And you can use your spoon or your hand and just submerge them. Let them sit in that real cold ice water for about 3 minutes. Usually it's about the same amount of time blanching. You use that same amount of time for quickly cooling. Once they have sat there for 3 minutes, for the sake of time, we're just going to quickly show how this is done. You want to drain them. Okay, once you have drained the green beans, you can go ahead and put them into your container. You want to make sure your container is a freezer container or a freezer bag. We're not using containers that the whipped cream was in or the pimento cheese was in, because we want containers that are made for freezing. They are moisture proof, vapor proof, they have a tight seal on them. So you actually would just place the vegetables in the container and put your lid on the container. You want to leave it like a head space, about 1/2 inch on most of your vegetables, because they may expand some. So think about that with your containers also. You can also use canning jars with the wide mouth. They are okay to use for freezing also. Once you have got them in your container, you obviously would put the lid on. Now with plastic, make sure you have a freezer-proof bag, and you want to get as much air as you can out of that bag. So you want to press as much air out as you can before sealing it, and lay that flat in your freezer. Not this way. Lay it flat so that the cold air can get to the vegetables quicker, and it's easier to store into your freezer. When placing them in your freezer initially, leave space around the containers so they can actually start freezing. But once they're frozen, you can take the containers and put them closer together in your freezer. Another item that you may use for freezing is your food saver. If you have one of these are great for meats, freezing various things, but also freezing with your vegetables. Because it does such an airtight seal, it does help prevent against freezer burn, and you really have a good quality vegetable frozen. A couple things to consider. Things that obviously are denser will do better in a food saver than something that's real juicy, because it would squeeze the juice out. But if you are using an air saver, food saver, not air saver, you still need to blanch your vegetables. That is still recommended. I personally have used this for corn on the cob and been very pleased. So that is just a choice that you have when you're freezing vegetables. A couple of other last things I wanted to mention. You do not have to prepare peppers and onions the same way you do other vegetables as far as the blanching process. You can actually take your fresh onions or peppers because they have a very crispy texture and you can use them in cooking. Just go ahead and wash them, and then you can actually slice them into strips or cubes, however you want to do it, and actually put them on a piece of parchment paper in your freezer or wax paper and set it in the freezer for just a few minutes till they get pretty hard, and then just loosely pack them into your freezer container. There again, trying to get as much air out of the container as possible. But this is a quick way that you can do your onions and your peppers. Now, as far as your squash and your pumpkin, you cannot can those. So freezing is the only way recommended for preserving your squash and your pumpkin. You can cube pumpkin for canning, but you cannot do pumpkin butter or puree or mashed pumpkin for canning. It's just not been research-based safe. So you can actually just slice the squash and blanch it and put it in your freezer containers for future use. Another way I heard about recently, sometimes you may want to cook it. If you love fried squash, why don't you try it this way? Go ahead and slice it, and bread it, and fry it up a little bit, and then put it in a freezer container. I do that with okra at my house. So I just take the fried okra that I've already fried and frozen and just put it in the oven and let it bake, and it turns out to be pretty crispy and yummy. So that's something you may want to try if you enjoy some of the fried southern foods that we enjoy here. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed being a cold can girl with me. I want to encourage you that this is an easy process and it can be done. Make sure that you have research-based recipes. And UT Extension puts out a book called Freezing Foods, and I have a little contest. The first 15 people that respond to this particular video, I'm going to send you a free Freezing Foods book from UT Extension. Thank you so much for your time, and happy food preserving. Remember, you can. Thank you for listening to my video on freezing vegetables. Our next series of the Can Girls will feature how to freeze fruits, and I'll be demonstrating with peaches. So I hope you'll join us for the next Can session.